So hello and welcome everybody. Hopefully you can see both of us okay and you can hear both of us okay.
Yeah, congratulations.
So Tashi Dele, greetings to everyone. Everyone can hear? Awesome, okay.
Oh yeah, congratulations.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to all Dharma friends, and Geshe hopes that everything is going very well and perfectly for you. So also Geshe hopes that on the basis of your study and your practice, that your mind is becoming more open and vast, that things are continuously improving. So, of course, the nature of our mind is something clear and vast, but if we are not able to kind of tap into that and build on that, we'll kind of remain stuck in that narrow-minded, that narrow-minded framework. So our kind of situation is like this. There is a flower with many, many petals that is kind of closed in on itself. And then within that flower, there is a statue of a Buddha. So our situation is a little bit like that. So, of course, we can say that we actually have two sources of refuge using this analogy. We have the outer sources of refuge, which are the Buddhas and the bodhisattvas, right? Those external beings that we pray to. And then we have that inner source of refuge, which is like this statue which is held within the flower. So in the sutras, right, the Buddha explains the principle very, very clearly. He says, I am the one who points out the path to liberation for you, right? I cannot give you liberation. The Buddha is very clear about this. So the Buddha explains things, right? But the one who gives us liberation is we ourselves. The Buddha can't just like hand the path of liberation and its completion to us. Oh, I see people trickling in. Welcome everybody. Lazy Sunday morning, maybe beautiful weather, so welcome everyone.
This one,
So if we are kind of seeking that real happiness and we want to proceed to that real happiness, then also that momentariness, we want to do that happily, right?
So
part of what we're learning here, right, is to differentiate between, of course, we have outer circumstances that make us unhappy, but looking on the inner level, what are the minds that lead to our unhappiness? And on the other side of that, also identifying the minds that we can cultivate that lead to our happiness. This is an important part of what we're doing here. And so the scholars and the holy beings, right, they've identified the different sorts of minds which can cause us problems, and they posit the king of those problems as the darkness of ignorance, right? The fog of ignorance.
어떤 다른 일아야 돼. 세자 추슈 페베트 과되는 다 내서 추슈 지소는 돈에 대게 달 쪼지세요.
So Geshe would describe, so there's two words in Tibetan for ignorance, marikpa and timuk. Geshe is using timuk, which has like this concept of like a fog or a darkness. And Geshe is identifying the characteristic of this timuk. Timuk de busu topodi, then it timuk busu topodi, then it
센세 고 마신 거과
So it's a narrow-mindedness because of a fog that keeps us from seeing the whole picture. We're kind of stuck in a mentality. So this word timuk is very interesting because it's not used as often as marikpa, but it has that kind of connotation.
키가 쪼니야래 스콜.
Timuk, eh?
Yeah. 내가 쪼치데 소소 집어 나머지 다 대화돼야지 소되게 말했어.
So this timuk, this mind, this fog ignorance, that's what I'm going to call it. I know it's not elegant, but it works. This fog ignorance mind, it has sort of two functions. One of its functions is only to seek happiness for ourselves, only to seek happiness for ourselves.
다 대요 예를 마티파 나세한테 코로포게 코로 집어 대대한다고 노아지 야 콜쇼닌디 왔어. 소소 집어 대신 손으로 둬야지.
Los yenda latene yongyo.
예를 마티파 코로 집어라고 옆에 노아지 야레스.
The second is an appearance that our happiness is just something we can do ourselves, that we are kind of like an individual doing this happiness, and it is not something that arises in dependence or in relationship to others.
다 뜨면은 놀러는 세나 주고 야래 바시 론진저도 단자 말이 바니데. 요산다보데 코시데 코렌디 왔어.
So we could say that this timuk, this fog-like ignorance, rangchensen dankare,
단자 말이 바.
it is kind of like the base from which the self-cherishing mind and the ignorance grasping at the self are arising, right? Because it's like that limited view.
짜와 텔레 대요 바지. 다 디토를 다 내가 그건 에서는데 저 슈침보질래. 하고서와 다 대만도 했더니 강해지 되게 하래스.
So it's kind of, and then behind, so with those roots, then there's a way of thinking that this leads to, right? Which is like, I need this, or I want that to happen. And then when it doesn't unfold as we expect, lopangires, madruna karje.
madruna 다 했더니 다 덤보 알렌데 저 들어왔어. 다 텐데야 그때도 다파 노도 몸보지 더니 저한단 말이지 강해지 되게 하래스.
So an attachment arises, and we try to get that thing or facilitate that situation that we want, and that doesn't always go according to plan. So along with that, then this builds a lot of namtok, a lot of false projections, and also other afflictions can arise.
다 대소만 누지 만져 받을 바치 레소나. 더니 텔라 때는 다 컨트롤도 요노도 남만지 인거 알아서.
If a big obstacle arises, which really kind of totally prevents us from being able to get the thing that we want, that we desire, then this can very quickly lead to anger, right? Because of a resentment at not being able to achieve that.
렘보조 자보코 뜨면 되지. 렘보조 니도.
And so we could say the two sort of chief ministers of this ignorance are attachment and anger.
그래서 다 들인데서 만다와지 냠보게 제시바이나. 쇼바티가 컨트롤게 냠보도 노지유도 알아왔어.
러스.
니지 때가 내철 냠보. 쇼주지 세티가 뜨면 냠보시기 알아서.
Ale. So some holy beings say that the antidote to anger, kongjo jamparwa, is love. Dza ningjerwa, that the antidote to attachment is compassion, and that the antidote to this fog-like ignorance is bodhicitta. This is one of the presentations that you'll see. Yeah. And so you also have to like experiment with these things and see how it goes according to your own experience, right? Yeah. So identifying what the faults of the mind is, and then really seeing the type of minds that are not only its antidotes, but that also lead to mental happiness, and trying to cultivate those as much as possible. And so that is really cultivating knowledge, right? And that's what wisdom means, right? Coming to that knowledge that allows us to open up, that allows us to activate the potential of our mind. So if we know kind of how to sort of watch it like a game, to play with the mind in this way, it can be a really interesting thing to watch. If we have this sort of playful attitude to watching the mind and to trying different things in the mind, right, then cultivating the mind for 3 unfathomable eons, right, for 3 kalpas, it doesn't seem like such a daunting thing if you can have fun while doing it. Yeah. So also Geshe said that it talks about, so I'm really sorry, there's like kalpas and then different kinds of kalpas and numbers within numbers. You'll see when we get to a part of Words of My Perfect Teacher. And so I get very confused, but there's like a great kalpa and like a middling one. So anyways, the Buddha, it was said he did like these 3 incalculable eons of accumulation, but he could do like 90 eons of like the small accumulation in the period of 1 week. So I think the idea is that it went relatively quickly, even though it's a big number. And so this is not exclusively from the perspective of Tantra, actually. This kind of faster cultivation is also possible with sutra methods. So let us take a moment to relax and to put the mind into a peaceful state. So just like a cloudless sky without kind of resting the mind on a particular thought, just appreciate the vast, unobstructed expanse of the mind as a way to relax. Like when the sun is unobscured by clouds, the sky is vast and unencumbered. In the same way, our mind is luminous and unobstructed. That is its nature. And so just as on a cloudless, clear day, when the warmth of the sun can contribute to the happiness of everybody, in the same way, when our mind is unobstructed and its luminosity and clarity are tapped into, it can be a source of happiness for others. If we can tap into this potential of the mind and connect it with qualities such as love, with qualities such as compassion, we can become a source of ultimate happiness for both ourselves and others. So think that within this clear and knowing aspect of the mind, which is at the same time neutral, we are going to place the positive seed of the mind of love. How wonderful it would be if both myself and others had stable happiness. May that stable happiness be actualized. I have the power and potential to be able to bring that forth. Therefore, I myself alone must activate this and lead others to happiness. Bring forth that superior intention. In order for that to come about, I will make single-pointed requests to the holy beings, the Buddhas, and the bodhisattvas. So we'll pause there. So Geshe is explaining that actually this preliminary meditation, if you're familiar, you probably noticed, these are the 4 immeasurables or the 4 boundless thoughts, right? So there's 4 of those. Today we did immeasurable love, and then within immeasurable love, right, there are various steps, thinking how wonderful, may it be so, I myself alone will accomplish, right? And so the 4 immeasurable or boundless thoughts are extremely important because they are the water and the fertilizer that is going to allow us to flourish this mind of bodhicitta, actually. So within each of those 4, we can cultivate according to 4 steps. So the 4 boundless minds have 4 steps within each of them in some presentations, and this is a really powerful way to bring forth the preliminary to bodhicitta. Tambo? Dumba tseme loso. Dene laksam? Samden sana? Oh, Sulwa, los. So dip. Okay. So Geshe is saying, and he said he's going from memory, so maybe there's different ways to describe it, but he's confident in the meaning. So the first of these 4 steps within each of the 4 boundless thoughts, so for example, within love, would be aspiration. The second step is prayer, and I should tell you that the Tibetan word for prayer, munlam, means wish path, which I think is really important in this context. So aspiration, number 2, prayer. The third one is this superior intention, and the 4th one is a supplication or request. Did everyone get those, or shall I do them again? Okay.
그래서 어다 칠라요 냐모고 쇼르코 다 잡아봐봐 노지 요아르잖아 팔라요 간서 냠버지 잡아봐 노지 디와스
Agi.
칠라요 가로서 강에 저기 세르지 잡아봐봐 노지 요아리
Hakusun.
요뭐 디와스
Yeah, yeah.
팔라요 냠버지 간서 잡아봐봐 노지 요아리
So Geshe said it's really important to think about the richness of all of these steps because often we feel like our afflictions, our unhappy minds are like a powerful, continuously falling rain. But the various antidotes are also at least as numerous as all of those raindrops, right? So that's really important to remember.
다 던지 요바 임발라 다 지나요 코포게 덴바 요메기 제바지 요아에서 다 니네 소설 레가시나 소설 계속하고 요아레스
And of course, there's a difference between those positive minds, they're grounded in truth, whereas the others are not, right? So if we engage in those things carefully, we can perfect them.
다 가와 쳔메서는 가 고근디 와스 저 마루에서 아데 그 로제 강가를 대시 템버스 주는 가와라 세기 요아레스
Yeah. So we also know a measurable joy or boundless joy, right? Thinking like how wonderful it would be if they were free of suffering, if they had happiness, right? That's really kind of the space of that mind of boundless joy. Chimarung dene?
저 마루에서 아데가 다 가와라 세기 요아레스
Oh, sorry, Gawala. So Geshe said how wonderful it would be in this context of joy. It's like this strong feeling of liking and wanting them to be free and to have that happiness.
다 드니존 카시르시르 고근디 와스 시워레디 와스
So when you approach, right, something like the four boundless thoughts from different angles, what's going to happen is the practice is going to become clearer and clearer for you.
메테지 릴라고 말다스 숑바도 니지도 숑주 세가 여조 가르레서 때 지야바 먹어요 아레스
So, this is very important because when we talk about love and compassion, we talk about the object, the point of focus we use to bring forth those minds, and there's different aspects to those. So this is good to know.
니지도 숑주 세라 다시 배웠던 뭐 슈치 뭐요 아레스
닝제당장식이셈
여조
율칭바레스 율멘라와레스.
메메메 그래서 여조한테 가르레스
So Geshe said one of the things that they debated about a lot at the monastery was what is the real object that gives rise to compassion, for example? What is the real object of focus that brings forth bodhicitta, for example?
어떤 니지도 내자 진짜 문다이 쳐봐서 제이찬 쳐봐 뭐이찬 쳐봐 어디지 가르레스
And what's the difference between things like compassion and attachment, right? What is the difference from the point of view of their ngodankare,
저
from the point of view of the cause, and what is their difference from the point of view of their essence?
소소 미데 소소도 다 니에도 또 와티 지바레 되요 알아왔어 내자도 니지세야 돼
Because, like, when you think about it in some ways,
소소 그 가사테 가보면서 다 토아니에도 또요 지바레스 소속 세도 하고 살아와 니지 대요 소속 여태 치토 아니 뭐 소속이 알아왔어 소소도
Yeah.
아니 내가 되고 소소도 더 아니 뭐
Right. So Geshe is saying that this question arises because when we look at attachment and compassion, when we reflect on either of those minds, both have the result of bringing the person or the being we're thinking about closer to us, right? We have a feeling of drawing closer to them.
이나요 지텔로요 못다 바래 지텔로 때 노아레 세아티 예와지 그러왔어
But we need to differentiate between these two because in terms of that in terms of that compassion and attachment, one is said to be an unmistaken mind and the other is a mistaken mind.
와야 다 못와서 제메 예요 알아왔어 이제 레렌노라 제저리 다 줄이 자노 그러와 대지 아버 다치서 그랬어
So Geshe said that, like, I guess an assignment, if you want it, we're not going to check, I promise, is to identify each of those four boundless thoughts and to think about how each of those has four steps within it so that you come to a total of 16 points. Just something to contemplate. If you like. So let us begin the recitation.
Shakya Dubala Chaselo Chede Kyabsu Chi Chondende Teje Jeba Dachomba Yanda Fazobe Sangye Sheba Dan Shabsu Dempa Deva Sheba Jiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Minamgi Temba Songye Chodende Pejawa Shakya Tupala Chaselo Chede Kyausu Chi Ho Temba Chondende Deje Jeba Dachomba Yanda Pazobe Sanje Jeba Dan Shabsu Dempa Deva Jeba Jiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Minamgi Temba Songye Chondende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chaselo Chede Kyabsu Chi Hogen Yugin Ujan Sam Bemagezar Dombola Yatsen Jugin Ujanye Bemajone Jesu Kodu Kanjo Mambeko Kegi Jesu Tadrugi Jinji Loshir Jesus Guru Duzum Sangye Guru Rinpo Chengenjukunda Dewa Chembeja Bache Kunze Jabo Sezolwa Devso Jinji Labduso Jinan Sangwe Bache Shiva Dan Sambalungi Joba Jinjilo Omahum Benza Guru Pemasi Omahum Benza Guru Pemasi Omahum Benza Guru Pemasi Omahum Benza Guru Pemasidi Saji Pegi
Joshi Medo Jor
Jiralinje Nidi Gembadi Songye Jindu Mede Movadi Jogunanda Jila Jepar Edam Guru Ratna
Mandala Kona Yadaya
Refuge and bodhicitta.
Sonje Jedon Soje Chenam La Jongchu Badu Dani Kyausuchi
dagi chinjen gibe sunamje jola benji sangye joba sho chedan sogi chenam la janchu badu dani gyabsu chi dagi chinjen gibe sunamje jola benji sangye joba sho chedan sogi chenam la janchu badu dani gyabsu chi dagi chinjen gibe sunamje jola benji sangye joba sho.
오야 다게 좀 오는데 스타로서 살레레 지네 단주와시 차뇽바 루세 좀마조요 somebody.
So not a lot of preliminary chat here, just going into the body and the mind and contemplating, just bringing the four elements into balance as a way of cultivating calmness and peace.
소소가 셀레레 연에 대바이나 좀메비타 나는 초라 소바 노돌라 소바 자치 야만우지 바람 바제도 야로요 somebody. 자치 발라
So then think, as we relax the mind, that any thoughts or feelings that may be distracting, right? We can just think of them as like waves on the ocean. When on a sunny day, when the wind stops blowing, those waves melt into the surface and the calm and clarity is restored.
셀루마데 응문에 루소소가 리그네츠 아니 세그네츠 마게네츠 간데지레드 다 레레 지네다 해지.
And then and then as we contemplate, as we relax, think about the aspects of our body, speech, and mind. Think, what is the nature of the mind like? What is the nature of my physical form like? And then think in terms of our body, right? What is the outer part of our body that we can see? What is its nature like? What are the inner parts of our body like? What are the coarser aspects of our mind that we can identify? What are the most subtle? How do these connect with our speech? And when is that speech wholesome or unwholesome? And if we think about our body, speech, and mind, contemplate all of the things that we've done and think whether in the last few days they've tended more towards wholesome or unwholesome. I think as we calm the mind and as we develop our focus, then there's less going outward, grasping at these objects. There is less opportunity for afflictions to arise.
소소가 내가 야쇼데 가제 터터 대서데 내 앞에서 주바 지은 거라다 쇼스로 하지. 가제 터터 때문에 뭐지.
So think that on the basis of this calm and stillness, my task is to direct these three doors of body, speech, and mind to what is wholesome, to what is virtuous.
대요 조대더니 다 세대 이자 다 지금 세 로지 야보데 로지 강가라 다 편바 타도 저거디 제가 다 소지지 공부도 가서 이 소마지.
And because everything begins within the mind, we want to direct the mind to the most powerful intention possible. Think, in order to be able to bring myself and all sentient beings to complete happiness, I must achieve the state of complete Buddhahood, bring forth bodhicitta.
조주세 그 제시원바도 니지나요 로지치만도 저야 말해 조주세 코로이나요 로지치점에 아로서 내가 지기나요 로지치점에 아이사 다 땡들도 더 그래.
Because love, compassion, and bodhicitta do not exist from their own side, do not exist inherently, because their causes do not exist inherently, because I, as the person bringing forth this mind, does not exist inherently, it is definitely possible to realize these.
로지 쳐봐서 아직 가서 여봐이나 공원라요 뭐 디비가 코로치고 대바지 그거 알다 근데지 공치 공용 매바시 워레도.
If these things were inherently existent, they'd have to be able to arise on their own without depending upon any basis or cause. When we reflect on it that way, we see how none of these, love, compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth, arise in a vacuum. Therefore, they are not inherently existent. So we'll pause there.
어쨌든 때 같이 모르다서 로지 요비 체지 요 잘라바이나 코로 요 말이들 코로 요비 체요 하레스
Korong yepe sesana?
로지 요바
Rangshingi yopa?
코 요나 공라요 못디비가 내지 요가 요바.
So Geshe said it's very important to understand the measure of defining something as existing from its own side or existing inherently. So the rule, or sorry, not the rule, the criteria, sorry, bad word, the criteria it would have to meet to be existing from its own side is that it would have to arise in and of itself independently. So just think about that line of reasoning.
쿠반도는 룸버치 요도 요 말아와스 이나 룸버치 요비 체 요나 간디스 요가레스 느리지 요가레스 아주 요아레스.
So you can think about, like, well, the room that we're sitting in doesn't have one. There's no elephant here. Maybe there is at your house. So you can think about, there's no elephant in your house, but if there was an elephant in your house, what would it have to look like? What characteristics would it have for you to be able to define it?
어다 때노징 알아서 나 롱지지 요나 세 롱지지 요나 리 롱지지 요나 느리지 요 요가레스 아주 요.
So if the self had true existence, if phenomena had true existence, if the I had true existence, what would that truly existent self, I, phenomena, whatever, be like? What would its characteristics be?
라마 총카피 과잔 니주시아데 이니 멘징 엘 tum바니 라발라 가침보 이사데 조 대시들이 말이야.
So this is what Lama Tsongkhapa talks about as identifying the object of negation. And he proposes that if we are to realize emptiness, identifying this object of negation is really, really important. So actually, this is what we could call this an uncommon characteristic of Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation, is this emphasis on recognizing the object of negation. You don't see this same emphasis in other presentations. And why this is important, Lama Tsongkhapa explains with the image of, like, you can think of an archer with his or her arrow and a target, right? If you don't see where the target is, you'll be shooting arrows all over the place without hitting the important point. Similarly, similarly, a traditional example, if you are trying to get an obstacle out of your house, do not send the torma inside, right? You need to carry the torma outside. The torma is that ritual cake, right? So similar example there. So recognizing, identifying that object of negation, we need to be clear that this is not a simple thing, right? That this really takes a lot of effort to be able to do. And this is because of, like, this complication is because whether we think of like self, whether we think of like other, like another person out there, together with that conception of self and others, there is that appearance of true existence, right? That comes together with all those. So then, right. So this is the reason that many scholars say, and it sounds a little bit incongruous, but they say that before meditation, you have to call upon ignorance grasping at the self to arise the same way that you call upon the deities in a sadhana. In other words, for you to be able to identify it, it has to show itself. Loso. Menchik tangeres. Mentigeres. You di drogeo mare karin sanangatso la surwa tevya la yongores duas. Natsa di menla tene chungru drogires.
Pena naza chimbo yoki chen dada hama gona ha koya ge cheda to mo mi chi to ne la ki naza di chu chira ge ya chi so yo ara is rich.
Loso. So Geshe said that in some traditions of medicine, actually, if a disease is not identifiable, the doctor's going to give them a substance to make that disease more manifest in order that they can identify it. So this is the paradox that we are suffering from, this illness of the ignorance grasping at the self. But for us to be able to identify it, we need it to become a little bit more manifest. Like chaladabu. So one teacher instructed his student to find the ignorance grasping at the self and bring it back to him. So he was like searching all around, like, where can I find this thing, right? So like a lot of his students, they kind of got up and they started looking around for this ignorance grasping at the self. But amongst that assembly of the students, there were two that were a little bit more scholarly, and they said that ignorance grasping at the self is not an internal object, so it doesn't make sense to like look for it physically. And Geshe believes, the story he believes the Lama in this case was Pabongka Rinpoche. He scolded the two scholars who were kind of just sitting there doing nothing and said, you know, you should go and look for it just like your classmates. In konso nangla yeres hakona dites yaga. Ale la konso yabo so gire sans. So I was saying to Geshe, I was a little bit confused by the story because doesn't that show that like those two scholarly ones kind of had it right, that it's not an external object? But anyways, how the story goes is that they were too, like, I guess, content in their own knowledge, a little bit prideful. And because they didn't go up and put in that effort, they got a scolding from the Lama. Please. Yeah, didn't it? Ale, loso. And so Geshe said one of his teachers at one of the teachers at the monastery used to have this tradition of he would give a period of silence for the students to locate that object of negation and to meditate upon emptiness. So he would start without saying anything at all. Yeah, so there is a reason, Geshe said, for that approach. I was just saying to Geshe, like, I guess I'm supposed to remember stuff, right? But we know that's hopeless. And like, I need the whole story, not just half, and I fill in the rest. But yeah, I guess I should remember. Yeah, So Geshe said that he wanted to share this today about the object of negation, because where we are in the text, in Words of My Perfect Teacher, it's actually going to be easy for most of you to understand, right? The topic is going to be a little bit easier. So it's good to think, maybe challenge ourselves a little bit with the profound topics as well. So if anybody is following along, we are on page 32 in the about halfway down the page in the paragraph that begins with at all times. At all times. Mare. Dudang nampa tamche dudang jula.
Didu nomba toche da rujila. Runjoche yeten da to tsuma tsu tapa la joden begi.
So at all times, you should take pains to examine carefully whether or not you have all the elements of the freedoms and advantages. If you fail to check and any one of those elements should be lacking, you will be missing the chance to practice the dharma truly. So knowing these freedoms and advantages, Geshe said, and being able to count them off, this is not a meaningless exercise, because as Patrul Rinpoche says here, if one of those is out of place, you won't be able to practice dharma in a very full way, right?
Chesere dabala jiche tende mombo tsugina pyugen dama tombi chi dabala jiche tende mombo tsu jishar magi.
After all, even the execution of a single minor everyday task requires many mutually dependent materials and conditions to be brought together. Is it any wonder that the realization of our ultimate goal, the dharma, is impossible without the conjunction of many interconnected factors?
타지 기파스리다 니가 페나 칼란다고 둘론다고 드닐 페잖아 주요하래 다 든디지 알렌더 발라요 코 몸보지 여러 몸보 추고도 와스.
So Geshe said that like a single minor everyday task, like even if you think of something like tuluk truya, right?
미미 칼라 진니
뇨야 당소야 당.
칼라 사야 테마지나요.
Yeah.
델제 몸보지라 되는 추고도 와스.
So think about even just if you want to eat one meal, right? Think about all of the preparation from the shopping, the cooking, the serving, all of the things that go into just having that simple thing like a meal.
This one, that tani chipi tapochi javala that delijo. She mogiba.
So then of course it makes sense that the pure dharma, right, in order to be able to enjoy something profound like that, there have to be a lot of things in place in the background.
Oh, did you? Then upena asa. 론드 시기 도송아
차디
론드 시기 차자지 꼬와라고 그지 자티 내처 시메라 수바마원 저기시 디노네 매치브 대용 아니 매차 매도 또 매차 매도 따와 라팔라서 베지체 모보 만종와 문주 대다 토지레 따와 따버지 만종나요 예 토전조죠 편바 주제 좀 매바 자기 자와니 시기바돈 자와 단조제 했던데도 알레 가테지 마촌나요 치나마드비 까와 자와니 매.
Imagine a traveler who wants to brew himself some tea. The making of tea involves many different elements: the pot, the water, the wood, the fire, and so on. Of these, just to light the fire alone is impossible without a flint, steel, some tinder, the traveler's hands, and so forth. If just one thing is missing, the tinder for instance, then the fact that the traveler has everything else he needs is of no use whatsoever. He simply does not have what it takes to make tea. In the same way, if even one element of the freedoms and advantages is missing, there is no chance at all of practicing the true dharma. So Geshe said that this example makes sense, but kind of just to think about the place and the time, right? Like if you were going to go from like a far off region traveling to Lhasa, for example, what would be one of the most important things that you would bring with you, do you think? It would be a flintlock, right? It would be a flintlock to be able to start a fire.
Just to go on the Kasi, Yendo Mochado, Janjana, Chado Kangatsuaji.
So think about it like in the old days, if you were traveling and you wanted to enjoy a cup of tea, even if you had some nice water, you had the tea leaves, you had a little bit of milk or butter and so forth. If you didn't have a flintlock, you wouldn't be able to boil and enjoy the tea, right? It's very clear.
Ota peten moji ini mizang nganzo ta tawa je don jomba chala so bata momo chin de ja so ji ma so na yo ngaro so ma che de do dem ba ta phoge pi ta bo se ye de ya la kwang do ya re.
So in terms of these 8 and 10, right, the freedoms and richnesses, if we are missing even just one of those, then we are not going to have the means of practicing the dharma fully, of bringing forth the positive mental qualities in the best possible way. So really seeing that, when we have those in place, that's an extremely important thing, right? This is why, we talk about some of the holy beings not really sleeping, because they understand it's like so kind of rare to have all these things together. They don't want to waste even a moment.
Yes.
Geshe said that the example of the flintlock is really effective for many other important points as well. So if we think about a flintlock, how it works, right? Yeah. So it's not like a Bic lighter, right? Like a flintlock, to get the flame going, you have to hit the stones together again and again and again and again and again. And you have to make sure. He said it was too many agains. Sorry, too many agains, but many times. Let's just put it like that way. So he didn't like that presentation. My apologies. So you have to hit them together many times. In the same way, with your meditation, especially if you are trying to cultivate calm abiding, you need to engage with the same object. You can't just keep switching around between different objects. You have to put the mind on the same object again and again, just like those two stones of the flintlock. So that's the same with love, compassion, bodhicitta, right? Putting calm abiding aside, even trying to realize love, compassion, and bodhicitta. If we really want to be able to bring forth those minds effectively, we need to be contemplating them, in the morning, at noon, and at night. We need to engage continuously. So that's why we have, right, these practices like the Tundruk, like the 6-session Guru Yoga method. This is a really skillful way that the holy beings developed for us to engage repeatedly with these minds through the course of a day, right? Yeah. So if so Geshe said that the 6-session Guru Yoga actually Yeah. So Geshe is saying that if so why is the 6 sessions? So that's like 24 hours, right? So that means that ideally, I was saying to Geshe, like usually people do it morning and night, but ideally you're doing this liturgy every 4 hours, right? So Geshe is saying some people might wonder, why do we have 4 hours as the increment? And the explanation is that if we bring forth like love, compassion, or bodhicitta in a powerful way, that's said to like be able to infuse kind of 4 hours with a positive potential. And so this is why there's that increment. Yeah. Yeah. So Geshe said this idea of continuous engagement is really important. So even if the time is short, contemplating or at least just thinking about love and compassion in the morning, in the noontime, and at night, even if it's a short time, these are small drops of water that may be falling from the ceiling, but eventually they will be enough to fill up the pot. Tina Rujila Lepa, Tona Tanjo Joji, Tsuang, Neba, Kate, Hesa. Tawa, this one? Yeah.
Tawa Legion Joba Jetsuan, Gay. Then you merge Umbo Tsun, you is a show, so yes, see John, Ledge Talu, Lola Shushi, Jaitambala, Matena. Sele me, Deni Guruji Matsona Jeleme, Telejo, Lechata Malu Panda, Shanta Gate, Gos Magay Lela Sheji. Geshe, Tsendi and the Masona, Tsenda Zumboto, Kepasus, Trajon, 대한다 레타 로바이.
So, next, someone born as a human with all his faculties intact it's a longer section. If you check your own mind carefully, you will see that even the basic 8 freedoms and 10 advantages are very difficult to obtain, and that to have all 10 advantages is even rarer than to have the 8 freedoms. Someone born as human with all his faculties intact in an essential region, but who becomes involved in a lifestyle conflicting with the Dharma and who has no faith in the conqueror's teaching, only has 3 of the advantages. Were he to obtain either of the 2 others, he would still only have 4. Now, to have a lifestyle which does not conflict at all with the Dharma is extremely hard. If any of a person's thoughts, words, and deeds are negative and his motives are for this life, then in fact, even if he has the reputation of a good and learned man, his lifestyle is in conflict with the Dharma.
어다 뜻이 워레도 모시게 하면 도와서 어다 가제 먹기 가제 멀시와 이나기 다 어다 치킬렘바 이나요. 대다 고서 먹게 쇼로 슈치 monro소나 알레타 말로바도 찬로야이자 조지데 마송아레스.
So Geshe is saying that, not much to explain here. The principle is pretty clear that, even if one is born as a human being, and even if one is born as a human being and rarer than that still has an interest in the Dharma, if despite all of those other factors one is engaged in unwholesome activities of body, speech, and mind, there's going to be a conflict with the teaching, and there will not be much benefit.
오야, 다 연정알리 좀 템바시 치수 템바 네스서 좀 템비 고르 마슈나서레메 템비 고르 슈바테요 치시로도 통로종제 템비 고르 슈바 먼로.
That's what it is. So, the same applies to the 5 circumstantial advantages. If a Buddha has come, has taught the Dharma, and the teachings still exist, yet a person has not entered the Dharma, that person has only 3 of those advantages. Here again, entering the Dharma does not simply mean asking for some teaching and being given it. So Geshe said, Patrul Rinpoche's tone here is not particularly easy. So we have to think in terms honestly, right? We have to think honestly in terms of what he's saying. Does this apply to us or not?
타비 로네스발라 코타도라 님보 메바 시빙 인주글로 찌마 많이 바시도 태제절로 던져와라 찌마 많이 메션주세 지라시와시게
Okay, listen. So, the starting point of the path of liberation is the conviction that the whole of samsara is meaningless and the genuine determination to be free from it. To travel the path of the great vehicle, the essential is to have genuinely aroused bodhicitta. So that's not easy, right? To enter the door to Dharma, this means that one has brought forth renunciation, right? One has brought forth definite emergence. So Geshe said that this is a mind that definitely strives towards liberation. So that's not something that is so easy to bring forth, is it? Yeah. Yes. So, and this is a really stark reality because we can see that in terms of liberation from suffering, we have not achieved that. And in terms of that suffering itself, we have experienced this again and again and again and again in many lifetimes within samsara. And so what that shows us is that this mind that is definitely striving towards liberation, that door to the Dharma, is not necessarily easy to bring forth. The Dharma is something that is extremely vast. It is something that is... Ale, sorry.
Dungal charge ina yo.
Ale, sorry.
Oh, so so tandare ta tembo si machena.
Oh.
Magubala ina jachimbo to tisabo tanda tililabo mares.
Sorry, so Geshe is saying that if we don't do something about suffering now, when we have the opportunity, if we don't do that, then suffering is something that is kind of endless, so it's very vast, and it is something that has many layers, so it is very deep, right? And so it's very easy to get stuck within that.
다 땡기는 데가 뭐도나 타박을 번도야 별로 땡보치 단다. 다 얘네 양도 만도 간서 파. 셰도 뭐시 소실라 바리가 아레스.
So if we don't want to do this anymore, if we want to get off this wheel of suffering, then we have to cultivate the dharma correctly. And this is a responsibility that is in our hands. It depends upon all of us.
답이 대시 얘네 답이 대시 저런 로도 뭐단 록 해야 돼. 다 소시 된다. 다 대체 되면서 얘네 소시 된다래. 왔어도.
Yeah. So and achieving this happiness of liberation, this is important in the Theravada teachings as well as in the Mahayana teachings, right? This wish for liberation is something that we need to have in place. And this is something that is fulfilling our own welfare. So it is very much connected with our concern for ourselves.
다 거의 대화를 찾아봐 이나이 가로서 다 주의를 시차를 주면을 시차를 다 잡을 뭐뭐 시차를 간서 다 대화 요 많이 사치 주요 말해서
And it's really important to remember, right, that ultimately we have tried everything within samsara. We have been in the bliss of the form and the formless realms. We have been kings, queens, and ministers. We have enjoyed the best wealth and riches. There is every single enjoyment possible in samsara. We have already experienced it.
이나요 다 되게 던지고 다 대시 되나요 거의 대시 되나요 저게 될래도 녀모지 있어 코페도 가게 주면 와스.
But because that samsaric happiness, even though it's pleasurable, it is contaminated, it is connected to karma and affliction, it is not going to be satisfying.
다 던지지 다 다리 멀리야 볼래봐야 본들 니네 포게 답이 대시 니네 시 포게 다 이니 민지 그거도 소밀 달로데 고데나고 쪼레 와스.
So please, having achieved this human rebirth then, bring forth this aspiration that at least what I really want, at least what I will really strive for, is this happiness, this bliss of liberation.
So Geshe
said that big theme these days, self-compassion, self-love, self-care. The very best kind of self-love, self-compassion, and self-care is to strive for that ultimate and lasting happiness. And so Geshe said also, with the people who are close to us, our friends and our family, right? When we have love and compassion for them, we want them to kind of, at least in some way, be able to work towards that as well. So the door to the path to liberation is the mind that definitely strives towards liberation, renunciation, or definite emergence. The door to the Mahayana path, to the path of the great vehicle, is bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment.
칸데 셰로동 세기 젬바조 뎀비 고슈바 고슈 임베 녜바메 디나 단조저 롱이전다다 제저바 마노와시니 따제샤바 가체와 이노.
So the minimum is to have such unshakable faith in the three precious jewels that you would never renounce them even to save your life. Without that, simply reciting prayers and wearing yellow robes is no proof that you have entered the dharma. Make sure you know how to identify each of these freedoms and advantages, and to check whether you have them yourself. This is of crucial importance. Yes, sir.
Samba kai pela rewe.
Yeah.
Pela somba na. La chembe nomba tribe jasi ting nyashi go pogadon. Sha je ribachi ramba cheba lejo melito kawa joden deji suite den to san je东升的假设全部记得就把第一看没弄个啥地位洗了，伢洗的抓把得到不个几把洗，下着垃圾那就拉你下的得把说，给起就我们得帮着话是要啦。错地的那riba龙啊，落家人错，落家人那错卡来人公啊是也把第你这把那现在干的，伢洗三面了，riba错一落面。riba longa la nyashi tai me nyashi ten shu shi de na che si ba le ti jiwa ki ji jo ma de riba ten to da choga nyane do na che si ba le lo jare na choga le re manju ye de ni che ba shen de ka yong tiang gi nyashi ge
So it's a long one, but Geshe said he wants to read through the example because it's a nice example. So we are halfway down page 33, reflecting on images that show how difficult it is to find the freedoms and advantages. The Buddha said that it is more difficult for a being to obtain human birth than it would be for a turtle coming up from the depths of the ocean to put its head by chance through the opening of a wooden yoke, tossed around by huge waves on the surface. I know people don't have English as their first language, so I'm just going to say for their benefit, a yoke is basically like a ring made out of wood, right, where the turtle could possibly poke its head. Imagine the whole cosmos of 1 billion universes as a vast ocean. Floating upon it is a yoke, a piece of wood with a hole, he tells you what it is, sorry, with a hole in it that can be fixed around the horns of draft oxen. This yoke, tossed hither and thither by the waves, sometimes eastward, sometimes westward, never stays in the same place even for an instant. Deep down in the depths of the ocean lives a blind turtle who rises up to the surface once every 100 years. That the yoke and the turtle might meet is extremely unlikely. The yoke itself is inanimate. The turtle is not intentionally seeking it out. The turtle, being blind, has no eyes with which to spot it. If the yoke were to stay in one place, there might be a chance of their meeting, but it is continually on the move. If the turtle were to spend its entire time swimming around the surface, it might perhaps cross paths with the yoke, but it surfaces only once every 100 years. The chances of the yoke and the turtle meeting are therefore small. Nevertheless, by sheer chance, the turtle might still just slip its neck into the yoke, but it is even more difficult than that, the sutras say, to obtain a human existence with the freedoms and advantages.
So
Geshe said that this particular example, it is not really an easy one to accept, maybe, and it's a really difficult point, right? It's heavy, but it is the Buddha himself who gave this example in the sutras, so it is something we ought to consider. Right. And so Geshe said also, with these analogies, it's not necessarily something that we're supposed to take literally, like we imagine that there is this blind turtle that lives all the way at the bottom of the ocean and that comes up every 100 years, and there's this yoke which is floating around all of the oceans of the earth, and then it comes up and pokes it, that there really has to be such a turtle, right? This is a skillful means of the Buddha. It is an analogy to show us the rarity of something. That is the purpose of the story. So it's to show us that achieving this precious human rebirth, this human body that we have, it is so extremely rare. It is even like more rare than if there's this yoke, this piece of wood with the hole that's circling around all the oceans of the earth, and a blind turtle that comes up every 100 years. The chance of it being able to put its head through the yoke. It is rarer even than that. And so Geshe said also, we need to be really clear, right, that this is not an analogy for any human rebirth, right? This is the analogy for a precious human rebirth, which means with the 8 freedoms and the 10 advantages or richnesses. So Geshe is remembering this story. He said it might come later in the text. He thinks it might, of Milarepa and one of his disciples who was a hunter, and he said to him, you know, you're acting as if like a human rebirth is an easy thing, as if it's not precious at all. So it's really something to contemplate, you know, in terms of if we think about the rarity of this human rebirth with the 8 freedoms and the 10 advantages, then using it to engage in negativity, right, this would be a real loss. So when we contemplate these analogies, when we think about these points, we want to develop this feeling of there is this precious, wish-fulfilling jewel that is being held within our hand right at this moment.
Tabo chaba yimbache, ta jima chaba de matoni ta maname nomazuni la.
Yeah.
Chaba loba tani garwa.
Loso.
O ta konzo gemba nonile koto hal level leka pito bole gundu sinjite gshawa.
Jiringi chawa. Loso.
Nomazuya inere ta leka karira hal level jachembo. Tembo so gundu was.
Yeah.
Te jese karire du so ta che so gdela. Konzo gemba nonile chuchuka nile malisa at to chembore. Nipa chembore.
Yeah.
O ta chembore sa ti loju do ya ita.
Yeah.
Konzo leka chembo che to gundu.
Okay, right. So Geshe said that there's like a saying in Tibetan society, Chapa denso konso midya gileka che tuba da wachi chapa logyo denso. Right. That a disrobed monk or nun is actually able to kind of engage in worldly life, be successful in worldly life, even more so than a person who was always a layperson. And the reason for this saying, Geshe said, he thinks, is because in the monastery, this idea of the rarity of a human life and its impermanence is something that is kind of really instilled in the people who study there. So because they have this sense of urgency and rarity, right, the former Sangha members, they kind of engage with that mentality, which allows them to be successful. Yeah, so Geshe, this is something that the monks say, right? This is something that lay people noticed, right? That the former monks and the nuns, that they were kind of very capable in many things, and they wondered why. And it is for this reason that it's really important, right, that people say, like, also to tell children in school about the power of the human body and mind, about the value of a human rebirth, about the preciousness of this opportunity. And for us it's even more important, right, because just aside from those kind of ordinary successes, we are trying to bring forth the positive mental qualities. If we're able to develop conviction about this point, about the preciousness and rarity of this human rebirth, it will dispel the obstacle of laziness. And because of that, not only will we experience a better sort of progress in our dharma practice, we might also be more successful in our worldly activities as well. And when we are, if we're going to engage in the dharma continuously, we need a determination, and we also need to be courageous, right? So the teachings on these points are to help us develop that. And if we have this courageous attitude, and if we have this knowledge, then those little blips, those problems, those minor difficulties, they're not going to be able to throw us off track so easily. Okay, so we are on page 5. We are on the list called the 10 things to train in, and we are on the first point. So 10 things to train in. So the first one, having entered the door to the dharma, don't get involved with many mundane concerns, but train in accordance with spiritual principles.
So
Geshe said also the context here, Gampopa, is mainly addressing monks and nuns, but still we can take the spirit of what is said here, right, for our own purposes. So of course, whether you become a monk or a nun, this is something that's according to your own wish, right? Like this is something that you should decide yourself. But once you make that decision, if you are not trying to kind of maximize your time to strive towards that goal of liberation, to engage with that, but instead are just engaged in worldly things, then that would be unsuitable. So for monks and nuns, right, like you take those vows with this wish to achieve liberation. So of course you still have to engage with worldly and mundane things, but because of that aspiration, the main balance, the majority balance of your time should go towards that dharma, which allows one to achieve liberation. So really the main task then is to put that energy into cultivating those practices that lead to liberation. You know, spending the time to bring forth love and compassion that arise bodhicitta, right? This should be the main orientation in one's life. The next one, having left your homeland behind, don't establish a new base in a foreign place, but train without attachment. Tsik kensa chik du di payu pangne mi yul do. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So I was asking Geshe about the context of this because it didn't make sense to me. Because Geshe is saying that it's, you know, don't just leave your home behind, but just continue in attachment, right? You should strive towards liberation. But I said, like, but what does it mean to establish a new base in a foreign place, right? I didn't really understand the context of that. So that means you leave your home, right, to go to one of the larger monastic institutions, maybe, you know, very far from where you live, to be able to cultivate. So if you make that decision, don't fall into the same habit.
다 먹을 거지 요아래. 오 르그톨 고자케 이나요 파이바자니 고 고자가 로사로 와 당연히 고자가
So Geshe said it's the same, right? Like you know, for not just monks and nuns, if we decide to do a retreat, right? Especially if we go to the effort to kind of leave our house and go to like a more remote or quiet place to do retreat, if our mind is still with all the home concerns, not focused on that goal, then there's no point really, right?
다 듣게체 매바지 노징 아줄 게야 가르레서는 다 타바세야지 학대서 뭐시 차래 좀바도 손지도 다 전주세도 강한 뭐시 사이자 간디이나 집안만 되와 된다 좋아치도 그거야.
So like really the spirit of it here is like we've heard these teachings about liberation, right? We've heard teachings on love, on compassion. We've learned about the methods to arise bodhicitta. So we should see some sort of measurable change. We don't want to just have that knowledge and always be exactly the same as we were before we heard it.
다 노지 거의 대시 그냥 거의 대시 그때도 다 가져 먹을 가지 제가 이네 대샤시고 노르지고 그렇지 반다고지 된다 저기 와요 다시.
And samsaric happiness, you know, it's not special in the same way that in terms of like finding nice food, a comfortable place to sleep and so forth, you know, Geshe was saying he's watching the birds in the springtime. They're quite capable of doing that, right? Like, so the animals are also quite capable of doing that.
다 쿠바서 근래 다 가리나 걸어서 버스토바지 저기도 와서 나온다 버렸다.
Yeah, so Geshe said that so there's out of his window on the house next door there's like a nest of robins, and he said that like he was like really impressed at how smart and skillful they were in a very short period of time able to assemble a quite comfortable nest, right? So being able to do those things is not really that amazing. Geshe was amazed, he said, though, because like the robin took each piece of straw from the garden individually, but even just taking each one individually, it only took them 2 or 3 days to complete a very comfortable nest.
다 대지야 다 던지지래도 와 던지지 다 대시 지가서 배투고 말해서 다 가디나 그것도 그거로 왔어. 그거래 했더니 뒤에 투원을 다 앞에 떼모노야지 그거야.
So Geshe's not saying that we have to reject those happinesses and taking responsibility for our lives, like for our worldly lives, of course. But along with that, we want to be able to also spend some energy striving towards that happiness, which is beyond samsara.
단디와지 다 그래. 다 그래. 다나 뒤자셔라.
Yeah. So we will end on that second point. So we'll dedicate the merits, and we'll have questions after. If you have to go at some point during the questions, that's totally fine. But if you'd like to stay, you're most welcome. I just want to say one more thing. Dave does a really great job of reading all of the questions on social media to you. But I remember also what happened yesterday. I wasn't clear on some of the questions. So it's sometimes hard to follow in those long threads if I ask for a follow-up. So if you feel shy, you can keep your camera closed. But for the question and answer, if you do join us on Zoom, it makes it a lot easier for Dave, and it makes it a lot easier for me as well. So do consider joining us on Zoom. You don't have to use your legal name in your passport. It's a way to make it easier to ask questions. So I'll stop there. So thank you very much. With a mind lifted up in joy, let us dedicate the merits. Sanjo Rinpoche, Maje Panam Jinjoji, Chewan Yamba Meba Yang, Gone Gondo Bewa, Sho Toni Tawa Rinpoche, Maje Panam Jinjoji, Chewan Yamba Meba Yang, Gone Gondo Bewa, Sho Jambe Bao Jita Chemba Don Kondo Zambo Deyan Dejinde Deda Kungi Jesu Daloje Gewa Deda Tamje Ratungo Dusa Shebe Jawa Donje Ngowa Gangla Chodo Ngabade Dagi Kewe Tsawa Dikun Kyan Zambo Sheje Ratungo Shishingam dir Pedon dewa Malu Jongwene Chenre Ziwan Tenzo Janzo Ye Shape Site Bado Tengyo So through these merits may myself and others be able to actualize uncontaminated happiness. Through the power of these merits, may this positive potential become the antidote to purify all of the unwholesome karmas accumulated from beginningless rebirths in samsara up until now. From now until I reach enlightenment, may I continuously have the opportunity and facility to always work for the welfare of others. I am so fortunate today to be able to accumulate these merits and to purify these obscurations. So we'll pause there. So I see. So B, you were first. You were right in there, I think, even before we did the prayer. So I'll get you. By the way, I didn't forget to reply to your question, did I? Because I know you sent me an email. I did reply to you, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I have follow-up, but another time. I need to go earlier today. That's why I have my hand up.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I just, I always do offer people to email me, so I just want to make sure I reply to your emails. I'm a little busy with this school assignment, so it's possible I forget. So, that's why I asked you, B. But yes, no, go ahead. What's your question?
Okay. So I am basically a Garland student. So for many years, I listened to my teacher. I didn't realize that they were explaining Lama Tsongkhapa's teaching. So this idea of identifying object of negation makes perfect sense for me. And I cannot think of another way to realize emptiness without identifying object of negation. And therefore, I'm just wondering, those who do not have this kind of teaching, how do they realize emptiness, at least inferentially?
So that you mean to get to that level of understanding where you can have the inferential valid cognition, which you need to get the full realization. How do you do that without this emphasis on the object of negation? That's your question, right?
Yes, but put it in layman. It's like if you want to say there's no tiger in the room, you need to know what the tiger looked like.
Yes. Okay.
So if you do not first identify what the tiger looked like, how can you say there's no tiger in the room?
I got you. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask Ashila. Dene nanso ko lama mangchewa gelu kres. Dene di ko kandes lau kre di tawa di lama tsongkabi ki tawa hakumasung roa tama lama denso chatsang lau kres roa dene kadi ene seme topa lebiala toni topna nganso seni gogire dua di yongwala dene nganso gagja chi gogire duas ane kongi sem nanglo la roa gagja di masungna toni kandes topgires peche tobya yomares roa dene chuluk jendak denso konso shiptra chene gagja gi ngo senya gi drotam metsa konso kandes legires toni gi tawate
we are basically talking about all other lineages besides the Gelu.
Just a sec, he's answering, but you can come back after. Just let him give his first answer. We'll come back to you, don't worry.
Tate mare konzo tunya to ba yo mare sa tni to se yo maro was tende korosu ta karse tunya go jan te che ge dela
Yeah, so Geshe said that, like, he thinks that they might not have the same kind of instructions on identifying the object of negation, but in their own meditations on emptiness, they must come to see what that object of negation is. But he definitely says he would not want to say that they're not realizing emptiness, because clearly there are many who have, right, outside our school. So Geshe said, that that's not, they might not be kind of putting all this energy into, like, what is the object of negation? What would it look like if I were trying to identify it? What are the steps that I do to need to bring it up visibly so I can identify it, right? They might not have, like, that kind of step-by-step approach to it, but definitely through contemplating emptiness, they'll be able to develop enough of an understanding of it. That would be his answer.
Lama
Tsongkhapa's approach is very different, right? He's like very clear, like, this is the boundary of really starting to meditate on emptiness properly. First, you need to think about the reasonings and identify the object of negation. Then you can meditate on emptiness, right? Certainly that is his approach. Right. And that is, typical of his approach, of Lama Tsongkhapa's approach, which is, this emphasis on analytical meditation, on meditation as a form of analysis. And then once you get that refined understanding via the analytical meditation, then you do a placement meditation. So it's basically a step where we recognize the object of negation, right? We negate the coarse aspects of that object of negation, then the subtle aspects of that object of negation, and then we can settle into a refined meditation on emptiness. So this is the strategy that Lama Tsongkhapa proposes, right? Yeah. And so Geshe said one of the things that we can share, I think we've shared it before, but we can share again, is these four reasonings. For those of you who are interested, you can see the Geluk version of emptiness, Geshe-la's video, his teachings on that. He talks about these a lot. So these four reasonings. So Geshe says that he thinks through their own meditations, through their own methods, they must come to see what this is and to be able to deal with it, definitely. B, you had a follow-up maybe before we go to someone else. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Okay. I think I'll let it rest there. Thank you.
Let it rest? Yeah. No. Think about it. You can ask back next week if you want. Yeah. Take care.
I don't think there's anything clearer than that.
Okay. Yeah. No worries. So I think Deki Lee, are you next? I think you're next. Go ahead.
Thank you. At the very beginning of the teaching, Geshe was talking about love as being the antidote to anger.
Yeah.
Or that some would say that. I know I was taught that patience was the direct antidote and that love and anger could coexist simultaneously. Or
they could coexist or couldn't?
They could.
They could.
But that patience was the direct antidote. Could Geshe comment on that debate?
Yeah. Nanzo ngamadi kepa kashe roa kongdro gi nyembo jampare segidua ine ko di mare samsung karinsena namgi ngasu kongdro gi nyembo zepare slagidus ane kongi gegenchik gimsen dires karinsena semgi nangla jampa dang kongdro nyamdu deagi netsu chikyores zepa dang kongdro nyamdu dea kale kabore segidu.
Mara shomba do kuro nyembo tatare.
대도로다스 대도 때는 그랬어.
So Geshe would disagree. He would say that definitely love can function as an antidote to anger. He's pretty convinced of that.
하고서 어다니 뭐 당경에 라이트다 어다 대도 때는 저 리라고 요아레스 리라고 색깔을 나치나.
Yeah, so he's going to try and give like an easy reason for why this is his opinion.
그래서 아니 다 니지 때인데 작은 년보래서야 전주에서 떠미고 년보래서야 대지 또 간지스랜드 개파서 따지서 요아레스.
The one about 닝제 가르기
내 작은 년보.
the one with compassion as an antidote for attachment 아니신다디?
전주에서 떠미고 년보세요.
And bodhicitta as an antidote for the fog of ignorance. These ones are harder. These ones are harder to kind of, I guess, prove. But this first one, he thinks it's pretty easy to prove.
근데 이나서 도파서 기시고 동바 그때 개파치 못들이 왔을 때지.
And he says, if you remember, he said that this was the view of some lamas, right? So this is an unusual view. But these are qualified people, right? So they must have had a reason for thinking about it this way.
수도 제바 이나 단다테 안에 다 쇼바 하고 살아와 군도가 년보.
Yep.
안에 니진 내 작은 년보.
Yep.
전주에서 떠미고 년보래서 대가들 라기와 말다.
Yeah.
또 로베르 못 지겠던 수인데.
And so if you want to ask, who was it that said that love is the antidote for anger, that compassion is the
내 작은 년보
is the antidote for attachment, and bodhicitta is the antidote for fog-like ignorance. It was Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, who said that. So pretty qualified opinion, probably.
미타 대도 미 단계 대도 미 기차와도 같이 된데 주세요 아레스. 녀도. 에. 컨트롤스는 맞들 마가이세 슈 잡보시. 다 뒤수지세요 알아봤어.
So, but to go back to Dekili's question, right? Anger, when it's arising towards another person, it's coming from a strong dislike of that person in most cases, right? So it's connected to this mind of dislike. Love starts with liking the person, right? So love comes from liking the person. When we like somebody, it's a lot easier for us to wish them to be happy, isn't it? Or to think that they need and deserve happiness. When we dislike somebody, if something bad happens and they become unhappy, we might even kind of take joy in that. So that's how the dislike connected with anger is functioning. Yes, if we're really angry at the person, not only do we not want them to be happy, sometimes, you know, it's terrible, but sometimes you're wishing for them to experience problems, isn't it? Right? So Geshe would say that for that exact reason, because of connecting, so just to go back a little bit with what he said, connecting the like with love and the dislike with anger, he doesn't think it would be possible to have love and anger at the same moment in the mind. He would argue against that. Yeah. But Geshe said, why did this person think this maybe? Because they must have had a reason, right? He's thinking, maybe they're thinking of like a parent loves their child, but when they do something naughty, they might scold them. And at the time that they're scolding, they feel angry. So maybe that's what this what was trying to be expressed. But Geshe would say that that's not real anger, right? Because that scolding someone you like is based on wanting something positive for them. So he wouldn't say that that's genuine anger. So he thinks you could debate whether that is really anger or not in that instance.
Can I then ask,
sure,
why do some teachers teach that it's patience that's the direct antidote?
Then gegen mambochik Kongchogi nyambo zepares karecheni usijaki.
Mara zeba ures. Zeba yukurogi nyambore, shomba yukurogi nyambores.
It's not that patience isn't an antidote to anger. It's just that love is also. So
Okay.
one doesn't have to superscribe the other, right? So patience is definitely an antidote to anger, but love is also.
Yeah, control sana kon nasa chiro was. Nasa tele pemeu me yuare, jaiba meu ya, shiji meu yuare was.
So Geshe said it's just like, if you have like an illness, you might take Western medicine, you might take like Tibetan or Chinese or Ayurvedic medicine. There's like different types of medicine for it. So it's the same thing, just different types of medicine for the same illness.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Dekili. Dave, I see you have your hand.
Yes. So we had a question from social media. Let me go back and pardon me. I have to go back and get it. Yes. Okay. So Carol asks, please ask Geshe-la, what does it mean in terms of the karma of humans alive now, while there are so many teachings available online, but not so many practicing Buddhists?
Yeah. Dene, Chiwa dire dua. Gansu milu rinpoche kola labdi rwa. Gansu tutsadi, zambulingi tutsadi rwa. Internet ki gyune. Ngama dam minjawa sungsha karaguna yores. Sungsha halepe ting samo dang gya champo gegen mambone yores. Rwa. So, yine, nyamlin chegen nyunga dapogi nangwa chikyo-res. Di kare-chene-res.
Me, ta tedo dembore, yarawa demorwa. Ta tedo dembore, karere serela, ina neta lojo do tenzona ko lilar chinro somas. Tayo soso ta pake tembo machena. Ina neta do mowe da tandri nesala tene shi shawa ngo koyate. Ha leve pake chabamba no jisa tishul set shono yarwas.
Chumang chane dene kaudro damojo, the chudamaja wagine so
Se shi was the monte don da minimum paya ta yes kumomo was.
So Geshe-la's answer to this question, so first of all, he would like to say that you're absolutely right that because of the internet, the variety of dharma that we have accessible to study and practice, and also for people who maybe live in more remote places, right? There is just access like there was never before. And there's choice like there never was before. Why there may be this appearance that people are not practicing as much or as seriously, it's because of the internet also, because along with a lot more dharma, we have a lot more news, a lot more games, a lot more distraction, a lot more entertainment. So there's more dharma, but there's also more of everything else. So maybe that is why.
Pacha ganzul pacha zunge kanga yoarwas. Ina pacha ngyamba tende shuchega yoares, moa yoares.
Yeah. So Geshe said if you look at it in terms of like the imprints that people are getting through the internet, there's a lot of dharma there, which is putting positive imprints in the mind. But when you compare what's available about dharma to compared about what's available in terms of everything else, there's a lot more of that. So there's like a lot more kind of momentum and impetus to get sort of negative imprints or neutral imprints than the positive imprints of dharma.
Ta pacha ngyamba pya pewala. Sabe duga de pewala chabate shuchega yoarwas.
And also in terms of the ripening of the imprints, if you look at this day and time, the kind of rain that is falling is the rain that's going to sprout those negative seeds. That's the one that is more prominent during our degenerated time. But that's also partly because of our own habituation, right? It's just we're habituated in that direction as well. So at the end, the question's answer depends on us. If we use the internet in a positive way and we maintain stability with our practices, then this is a great opportunity. If not, right, it's also a great cause for difficulties.
This way. That there is an anthology as you jan and dash momo then no she's that so temples etc.
So Geshe said actually so much of, especially what he presented in today's class, the reason for emphasizing these points is to try to bring forth this stability, to really wish for people to have stability in their practice.
Yeah,
but he thinks the observation is a true one, is an astute one. Yeah.
And
Geshe also said that, he's concerned about the young people, they, in terms of if they want to meditate later on, that they're really not used to focusing their mind on something. They're on these phones and computers and games all of the time. Yeah, and that must have some sort of impact.
So
Geshe thinks that, like all of these devices and the constant use of them, we might not look at that as an illness, but in terms of its impact on our mental health, it is almost like an illness in many cases.
But
if we can put the attention into like looking at the mind, into trying to focus the mind into meditation in a playful way, seeing it as like almost a play, a game that's going on in our mind, then maybe that could be a way to present things.
Yeah,
So Geshe said, sorry, a long answer, but anyways, that closes his comments. I don't see any hands in the audience. Dave, is there anything else? Yeah,
Manoshi has a question. Go ahead, Manoshi.
Manoshi, yes, sorry. Oh, you know why I didn't see your hand? It's because your background is yellow. So the hand just melts into the background.
It blends in. No problem. So I was thinking about the freedoms and richnesses.
Yep.
And, these are ideal circumstances, but what if our ideal circumstances are not the freedoms and richnesses? What if we're sick, for example, or if we're in a bad situation or a country where there isn't freedom to practice dharma, So how do we skillfully approach this meditation on the human precious rebirth without getting discouraged?
Nganso delwa dang jorwa dinso yore roa dene yene perna nganso nepa shukchempo yena nganso rangwang mepa gi gyakap degen yena dene nganso delwa je dang jorwa chugi treshi jaya la tene semchuk ma chaya gine so kandis dabo samlo tango gretwa Kanisana chasama gogiris usushebojagi to a patrumushi. Then so men are the same macha candesogresa.
Mimita tedo Malaysia teta to chembodo soso gaze tata chenge lo to chewa.
Yeah.
So no to so no to get ni pati tende soso was.
So Geshe said that there's always like a context of everything, right? So we are looking at this right now, but also there are many extensive teachings, and he has taught extensively on taking the obstacles into the path. So how to transform the obstacles into the path. So in this type of situation, right, you would want to think about that as well. And Geshe said, like they're proposing the ideal circumstances and the importance of seizing on that moment. But he's reminded of the person who His Holiness the Dalai Lama described as his best friend. His Holiness has identified this person as his best friend many, many times, actually. And this person, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, he's Irish. He's from Ireland. And during the Troubles, during the ethnic conflict, he was shot. And he lost his sight completely. But based upon that experience, the compassion that he brought forth for others was extraordinary. And His Holiness was really moved by that and felt very connected to this man, and so always describes him as his best friend.
page leka halevi pito bo legi wares ropa jita tani leka lega mare kale momoja ga mare debi kala kale debi kala kaze tate leka cheto chil pheno gras koro so knowledge so to wares.
So also the other story that Geshe has told many times about like the people in the prison, right? When Tibet was first occupied, right? Many of the lamas went to prison, and so they were given work in the prison, and a lot of them, didn't want to do it. So they just did the minimum of what was required. But some of them really kind of put a lot of effort into it, and they asked, like, why are you putting effort into it? Like, what's the point? And they said that because, right, even in this situation, trying to transform it into a wish to benefit, even though the circumstances may be difficult, may this work be of benefit. So just using those difficult situations to practice. So Geshe said the outer conditions are very important, and we should understand these, right? So this is information we need, but we also need to think about it in the context of, during the difficult circumstances, how many tools the Dharma gives us to transform those circumstances into the path. And even if we have the ideal circumstances, that's no guarantee. Remember that Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's closest attendant who was with him all the time, he didn't become a foe destroyer even after like 99% of the Sangha had, right? He was like kind of the last one to get there. Ale konso gende ne pi da. So and how did he get to the state of a foe destroyer, to the state of liberation? He was kicked out of the Sangha community, right? His Sangha brothers turned their backs on him. He was expelled. And through that difficulty and contemplating it and changing it into the path, finally he reached that liberation that was elusive. So it's, as much as these situations, these ideal situations are powerful, transforming obstacles into the path is also a very powerful practice. Yeah, so Geshe said that, it's contextually, right? It's telling you that these things are very important, but even in the absence of this perfect set of 18, the 10 and the 8, there's a lot of dharma practice that can happen. He would say that. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it really comes to me that the dharma is really like medicine, and really understanding what particular remedy we need at the time in our particular situation is important, to be skillful in our application of the dharma even.
Yeah, totally. The context of it, right? Nganzo chu seria di nganzo di men re tuzu re ye re rwa ane chu hale pe mambo yo san di kadu pe tang na ma tang da wo chi sanlo tango gire diwa.
Yeah, there was them.
Yes, correct. Absolutely, Manoshi.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So we had a question from social media, but Jean has asked he's joined Zoom, so I'm wondering if he'd like to ask directly. Jean, would you
go ahead, Jean?
Sam.
Do you want to give the question?
Or I can ask.
Yeah, you can type it in the chat as well if you want Dave to read it. No problem.
Okay, Jean is unmuted. Go ahead, Jean.
Hey, very nice to see you again.
Is this Jean in Quebec? Yes, nice to see you, my friend. Long time no see. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. I asked a little question on the chat on Facebook. Relatively, I wanted to have Geshe-la's opinion on notions of automatic reaction to traumas.
Yeah.
And associated sometimes fantasy or urge to seek revenge that are very overwhelming or automatic. How is one to go about counteracting and also diffusing the those kind of popping up traumatic triggers,
So what you're describing, Jean, it sounds almost like a PTSD kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yes. How is one to because the way I've looked at those things was through it's a Mahamudra approach, and there's a lot of understanding that needs to happen prior to broaching that topic,
Yeah.
But I wanted to have Geshe-la's opinion on
Sure. No, I can ask him this. No problem.
Thank you.
Samsam nganso halepe nitsu duksha chikyu na nganso mitse nangla rwa perna mi seya tabche chena lo chung kapola halepe kange mambo sena dene nganso indicate trauma dabo chikire duwa disena bakshak chikyu re rwa nganso kadi ne sem nangla jigpa halepe shuk champo chikyu re rwa dene jigpa di shuk champo la tene bakshak di samsam nganso di wangsha mepa dabo chik min jogire duwa nesu chik nganso nguma gi nesu de la tene nganso nguma gi nesu di chena dene samsam nganso jolam hopte kala rangwang mepa duksha dabo chik yongire duwa samsam nganso di nguma halepe kange shuk champo tegen dinso nganso trashelen soya gi depa shuk champo chik yore duwa rwa dene nesu dinso kaplo la ya samsam nganso de rangwang chik mepa dapo chagire duwa di kande samlo tangures kokoson di chakshen seria di samsam halepe pentok chempo re duwa yene chakshen tets topo yin sang rwa nganso ngonjo mambo chik sao dogi re duwa rwa dene nesu di kola di nyambo kare dapo chik yore nyambo
rwa mepa rwa
yeah nguma halepe nesu dukshela tene di kadine chene jikpa dene dela tene di kala kapochi yonke
me ta te nesu te ane karse kar soso pa nebashi yak soso lena diga ngama te men rogarin roga mare te chi sono to kar was roma tombo pa nebashi yak soso lena
yeah so Geshe said that it depends on how it's manifesting, right? So one of the things that was mentioned was seeking like revenge on the person. So Geshe's answer to that was, is there a thought process behind seeking the revenge? If there's a thought process, you have a time to step back and think, like, if I do to this person, like what they did to me, is that going to make the trauma go away from me or not? Is that going to take the pain away from me or not? So you can think about that.
Pena pade da rabi omanjupa no la tille ta le ta res ne ba shibe ka te ke na tela ke bi shuso du go chi te te ke ne bande te me yite paro yo nang gawan jos pena ngaroso machi du nyoda tu ne la so so chi shuso na shu ne kange te so wa ta te yo ju ngal shuso nge le te gi sa pa chi shu wa ina ma chi shu ne kange te te me ndo go no do man.
So there is and there's a verse that Geshe quoted. I haven't memorized any verses, but it's from the Madhyamakavatara, from the Entering the Middle Way by Chandrakirti. And in that text, there's an example that if somebody says words that upset me terribly, right? If I respond to those words, does it take away the previous words and they're upset or not, right? So that's what we want to contemplate.
Ota men ro man do as ota te men ro me isa yonjo le te ater gipa yo mar chendele ina gipa yo mare.
So because that act of revenge is not going to remove the trauma or the upset or the harm, right? It's not a good path to go down, right? That's the argument.
This one, that se shimal chaja ba ina yonjo pa le chi te ba in le ngam ba chi san ro yon drive te no ji ko zoya me ba chi. Yes.
Yeah, kewa jema ro.
Ta chendele ina shi ma.
So the first example is from the perspective of this life. From the perspective of the next life, right? By giving an answer, by doing revenge for the harm, what we're setting up is to repeat that cycle of trauma in future lifetimes, because by us responding, we create a cause to receive that harm again ourselves, and that could unfold over a subsequent lifetime.
This one, ta te yashu chi tel o ta ngama shu chaya ten dipi ti se ko tembe ye zo ji re ma do. Ji cha so me wa cha so zo ma re cha so as chi to me so mas.
So Geshe said that like the way to heal this is the teachings of cause and effect, that this terrible thing that we experienced that's the result of a cause that we won't have to experience again. And if we break the cycle, we're not going to have that experience unfolding repeatedly.
This one, ta magubi masen deli in the Shiva Jimali in a death catching boyita, that you know so keyword or Yapoto Karina, Coca Kangayo, so much, then they talk ayares.
And Geshe said the other thing to remember too, right, is that trauma is usually something that has happened to us in the past, right? So it fashions our habitual tendencies, but we should think about our current situation. So in the case where your current situation is now an improved one, and you have the facilities to be happy, the facilities to experience positive things, then it's really important to remember that, right? That you are not the trauma.
That depend on what you know, Konimboto, Pecheto, that Teniza Koyo, Hakosara, the Zambian Rawachino, to which it and that depend like a maravast. So Tsikange is that.
Yeah. Hakusan. So Geshe said that normally, like, right, we talk about the negative experiences we have as the results of negative karma, and then we might recommend doing like a purification practice like Vajrasattva and visualizing the lights and the nectars. But he realizes that in the context of trauma, right, this might not be kind of the best advice.
Yeah.
And why it doesn't work in the context of trauma is because the negative thing has already happened to you, right? The result of the negativity has already happened to you. So from a karmic perspective, there's nothing to purify. That's already happened through that experience. So here we can train in letting go. So Geshe said, there's no magic answer for this, except really we need to think about different lines of reasonings and ways of thinking about it in order to kind of loosen that, and in that way, we'll slowly be able to be happier, less burdened by it. Yeah. And Geshe said also establishing a self-dialogue is really important with trauma. So instead of being reactive, to be able to talk to that trauma, to be able to talk to ourselves and think like, this is this experience that's happened. It's always coming up. If I follow the same path of dealing with it, what's going to be the result of that? So to establish that inner dialogue is very important.
Yeah.
And so Geshe said also this reactive aspect of the trauma of the PTSD, this can really be healed by introspection, right? We talk about introspection in the context of calm abiding usually, but here also, introspection is this kind of observer that's aware of what's happening in the mind and as it's arising. That can also help with these patterns.
Maybe I would just add.
Sure.
Yeah. The thing is that what I've seen there is that the cognitive part is very easy to. I don't know if I'm using the proper word there, but it's easy to undo cognitively or to justify to not pass through action, so that is and therefore you don't go through the action, but the reactive suffering of the trigger though is extremely physiological and definitely not cognitive. So there is one specialist on PTSD there that there's a book there, the body keeps the score. So what he underlines there is that you have an emotional reaction to factual event that normally factual memory doesn't initiate
Yes, it's stored within the body as a body sensation, like a tightness or something.
Aspect. Yes. So one saying of the teaching of Dalai Lama that he gave many years ago was translated in the line of it's only through understanding the emptiness of mind can one undo afflictions.
Yes.
So it was thinking in terms of that, but then I was thinking more in terms of the mechanics of the mind, more than the treated content of the mental process. So in that sense, I understand exactly what Geshe is saying. First, you need to process the thing properly. But however, I what I've seen now, and that's why maybe it's too wide a question, is that what about when you're engaging with the wrong mechanics of the mind rather than its content?
Yes.
And when you troubleshoot toward the assumed reified mechanics of the mind, it's when you try to undo under that line. So that's why it's a very particular topic. But however, and I understand I'm asking that question, and it may be far too wide for the.
No, I'll try to give the gist, because I understand the thrust of what you're asking, Jean, and also this is a very new field of understanding too, right? Like in terms of how PTSD is functioning. But I will try to give the gist of this and see if Geshe has anything more to say.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
No worries, my friend. Anytime.
Great service.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, I'm always. I always look forward to Sunday every week to be with you all, and so it's very happy.
I will too.
So, nanzo netsu kale kapo din sulaya rwa gengi labdang di ko data hako tsa so karin sen nanzo samlo tang di rwa norwa res rwa samlo tang di norwa yena deni jebu jaya kandes drogo res rwa ine tanda di semgang rigpa mambochi nganso netsu hale pe ting samo duksha denso nganso sem nangola nyargi omares bakshak denso samsam nganso lupo ginangla nganso supo ginangla lagire dua then it samlo tangya yomares roa drebudi nganso ngema gineso chi cheniala tene tsowa hale pe duksha lamsang dabochik yongire dua then it jaw rumboche di semgang ribadang drilling mambochik dua roa di mepa soela nganso semgi tompani hamakona bakchak ting samo denso mepa sutugi yona mena dabochik lagire duas then ko di kandes chik samlo tangore sangidutta karin sana samsam di jiko ki chowa dabochigere samlo tangsu mare samsam
mare ta tedo chimya chuto dembare tumbani ga chowa page ya tumbani ko ta thona to ta pitashu der was kos tega sonse chire ma to ko tsawa yinan zog chu sa chi tende yo mare te chowa So
Geshe said, yes, in this way, like, it's not so easy, but emptiness is the ultimate healer, because even the most kind of like subtle imprint, like you're talking about these traumas being stored, even those things, when we go down to the subtle level with our contemplation on emptiness, we're able to see that there's nothing findable, there's nothing pinpointable that exists from its own side. If we can see that, right? If we can see that, that will unburden in a very powerful way. So absolutely, right? That's correct. Yeah. And remember that the trauma is just a memory. It's stored in a specific way, but it is just a memory. It's a thing that can be designated only in dependence upon a memory of something terrible that happened to us. It is a dependent arising. So Geshe said that like his approach is more simple actually, in terms of like terrible things that have happened to him, he finds it very healing to think of these as the law of karma, and through experiencing that terrible thing, that cause has been purified, and he's free from having to experience that again. He finds that very helpful.
Yeah, it's a good angle. Yeah, definitely.
Okata karigata taeres, mutabi runji sono tone, onsoa di papia, umani sono tone papia. Hakasara, tene o ta jengen lo chenda wa lengen, but that mambochi doon over that, and re so much in it.
So really there's kind of 3 points that were proposed here, Geshe-la was saying. First of all, thinking about the emptiness of that imprint, right? This is the most profound one. Otherwise, thinking about how it's impermanent, how we've experienced that situation, the karma's exhausted, we won't have to experience it again. Or number 3, taking that negative experience and trying to take it into the path, so transforming the obstacles, like those mind training teachings. These would be sort of the 3 approaches one could have.
Yeah.
Ani ga cheshu te ta nga zo kanga ji bare. Ga cheshu te ta tin nikala nga zo ta ki wodo ko ga chimbo do ni pa chimbo do ka re ina. Yo po chu so no te ga chimbo rendus.
And also, Geshe said, in terms of those like past traumas, to just cultivate a sense of proportion in the sense that now we're in a better situation. We have more conditions for temporary happiness. We are not faced with that same sort of powerlessness. So we have the conditions to be able to experience happiness, to remind ourselves of that. So Geshe says it seems counterintuitive, but a mind of joy and courage can be the ultimate healer to trauma, especially joy. So study and practice, yes, is also very important, but to take the time for whatever gives you joy, right? Then you can improve. That can also be part of the healing process. Yes, so sorry, Geshe said a long answer. I saw 2 hands. I saw Sam and Brigitte, I think both had questions, so I'm not sure who was first. Whoever would like to go first.
Brigitte was up first, I think.
Yeah, go for it, Brigitte.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is, can anger be a tool to benefit others in some instance? Like, can it be with a good intention when you are angry at someone, like a kid who is crossing the street, you get angry maybe with him. Can it be a good? Can anger be good sometimes?
Yes, gotcha. Nganzo kontro seria di samsam neso yapo yong sigirebes, yapo yin chogires, perna pukuchik lamka bizichik usujabne dronana, roadene konso sunkyop cheagi chedu kontro chik yongire duas, di kaprolaya kontro di yaporebes.
Ya control ro sena maduta te ya te yabondo ya te res yapores te na control segare costujo se etc.
Re.
Oh, that is proper chichawa sha te ya ndogere te yapores chito.
So Geshe said your example holds. He's just not sure he would describe that as anger, right? Seeing the kid running into the traffic and not wanting them to do that, it's a wish to protect, right? So a wish to protect arises that has a wrathful manifestation. So it maybe looks like anger, but Geshe is not sure it's anger actually.
Oh, that te do te na la topo no ba sha te chikanga ta wonda wores se di ni la ko ne se yo mare. Oh, that popo kanga te ne se yo mare was yo pochi ma.
So it's like all these frightening and terrifying deities that we have in Tibetan Buddhism, right? Like they have this frightening and terrifying aspect, but inside their mind there's not a wish to harm at all, right? It's only a wish to help us.
Oh, kunto ro se go yo na mena ta tenda phama lo to pogel ta te ni le ka che to ta te ni ne se mo yong yo was.
So Geshe thinks in this example, he's not so sure that he would call it anger. But I'm going to push back Brigitte with Geshe because maybe we'll ask him, is there any example of where anger is benefit? You want me to check? Okay.
Here's my question.
Kontro pentok chea yongirebe samsam pe yorebe. Kontro yapo yimpagi nitsu yorebes. Samsam yapo yin chogires.
다 초기에서는 때에서 저거 했은 거지나. 뭐지를 배도 시야가 치야다. 아제 지를 내가 다 때에서 강에 때였던 용거로 왔어.
So Geshe said, it's hard to say definitively, but yes, like there are stories in the Buddhist scriptures where in order to protect a greater balance of people, harm was done to one person, and maybe that was in a mode of anger. So it had a more positive outcome. So if you look in that way, then you can't say anger is never beneficial.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brigitte.
야, 저도 되지 나온다 왔어. 저 마야 이나요. 그러면 다 노지 먹게 와래더니 그거 어서 고토는 거야 왔어.
It's like a lie, right? So normally, like when you hear the word lie, we automatically have an idea that that's negative, but sometimes a lie can be to protect somebody, right? So it can go in a more positive thing. We can say a lie to protect someone's life, for example, right? So things like that. So I don't see any more hands. I think
Sam, do you still have a question?
Did you have something, or are you?
I think the time is advanced. I don't want to.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Write it down for next week. That's great. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. So I think we're done. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing this beautiful Sunday morning with us in the summer, which we get so little of. And maybe we'll see you next week. Take care.
Oh yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, Jean. That was really good.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you, Jean. Appreciated your question a lot.
Yeah. So needed, John.